Support for Wavemakers comes from listeners like you and the Tampa Bay Times. The Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper is available around the Tampa Bay area and online at tampabay.com. Thanks to the Tampa Bay Times for their support.
Good morning and welcome to Wavemakers with Janet and Tom, a weekly conversation with people making a difference in the Tampa Bay region. I'm Janet.
And I'm Tom.
And running the board for us today is jazz lover John Dunn. Answering our phones is DJ Spaceship. If you want to join our conversation, you can call us at 813-239-9663 and DJ Spaceship will get you through to us. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org or text us at 813-433-0885.
Today's Wavemakers are three people working to bring the arts and arts education to people with disabilities. In the studio with us is Matt Muller. He's a jazz saxophonist who was born blind. He's an instructor at the Battelle Conservatory at the Strass Center for Performing Arts. He also performs locally with a jazz trio and tours with a band that performs a mix of funk, jazz, rock, and reggae. He's also a composer using specialized music technology for the blind and a frequent speaker, including several engagements as a guest lecturer at the Peabody Conservatory at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. His greatest personal goal is to champion the cause of increasing Braille literacy for young blind musicians. Welcome to Wavemakers, Matt.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Also in the studio with us is Fred Johnson. Fred is a legend in the local jazz music scene and has been for decades. He's opened for or recorded and toured worldwide with jazz and R&B legends like Chick Corea, B.B. King, Patti LaBelle, Dizzy Gillespie, and Miles Davis. He's a leading voice in the national conversation regarding inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. He's also the artist in residence and community engagement specialist at the Strass. Both Fred and Matt serve on the Strass's Accessibility Committee. Welcome to Wavemakers, Fred.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. And later in the hour, we will be hearing from Emily Dixon. She's the director of programs at Arts for All, Florida, a nonprofit headquartered at the University of South Florida College of Education, whose mission is to provide support and champion arts education and cultural experiences for and by people with disabilities. So that'll be a little later this morning that we'll be hearing from Emily.
Lots to talk about.
Lots to talk about. So Matt, let's start with you and let's start at the very beginning. You were born blind and grew up attending Tampa public schools. How did that work for you as a student with a disability? Were you mainstreamed, or did you have special classes? Did you go to a special school?
I was, in fact, mainstreamed, so I did not go any specialized education. Was the only disabled student in all my classes. I had what is called a teacher of the visually impaired, whose basically their responsibility was to provide me with Braille for all of my classes. I would meet with the instructor once or twice a week after school and tell them these are the materials I need for the classes. Here are the tests I have coming up, and it would be her responsibility then to translate all of the print materials to Braille and or get me the appropriate textbooks in Braille that I would need for the classes.
So that's a lot of work. You were doing twice the work as a sighted student would do.
Yeah, just about. I don't know if I would say it, quite like that, but there was definitely some extra responsibilities on my part that probably most students don't have to, go through, I would say, for sure. Access as well to Braille is, of course, we can maybe talk about that a little bit later, but just getting access to Braille is something that's very important to me and something that has always been a challenge growing up.
Well, we definitely want to talk about that, especially, particularly what you, Braille literacy for the young blind musicians. I think that's something we'll definitely talk about. Let's move to that, though. How did you become interested in music?
Well, it was actually originally through my family. I had some grandparents that were my mom's parents, to be specific, who were involved a little bit at the high school level of music, but didn't do it professionally.
They were teachers?
No. They just did it as a hobby, just for fun.
Okay.
Just like in the high school, marching band. My grandfather played trumpet, and my grandmother played French horn, and they were kind of lovers of music, so they kind of exposed me to jazz and a lot of different music when I was growing up. I spent a lot of time with them when I was very little, when my parents, were working and traveling a lot originally when I was very small. And my grandmother was a realtor, and she actually came into the possession of an electric organ when I was about 9 years old. And so I kind of messed around a little bit on that, didn't really know what I was doing, took a couple of lessons. And then when I got to middle school, I was exposed to, basically they kind of try to show all the students, they called it the wheel. You go through band, chorus, orchestra, art, any extracurricular activities that the school would have. And because of the experiences with my grandparents, I picked band and learned about the trumpet and the clarinet and picked the clarinet. And then the band director said, I'm starting a middle school jazz band. We don't have a jazz band right now. And I think you'd be a good candidate for playing saxophone. So I think you should play saxophone instead of clarinet. And kind of the rest is history. I, in 8th grade, was in an honor band. They called it All County, and saw some students that were a few years older than me who attended the Blake School of the Arts here in Tampa, and met them, and they kind of encouraged and inspired me, so I continued it on and went to Blake, the School of the Arts, and then I was further inspired going to some collegiate summer camps, and kind of decided that it was going to be kind of my passion, at least a little bit. And so I went to Florida State, got my bachelor's and master's in music, and then moved back to Tampa, where I was very lucky. There was a opportunity to teach saxophone and jazz at the Patel Conservatory at the Strass Center.
And which middle school did you attend?
Adams Middle School.
Adams. And who was the teacher?
Originally it was Bob Chisholm. He's a principal now, I believe, or an assistant principal over at Coleman. It's
amazing the impact that a single teacher can have on someone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely. Yeah. He had a huge impact on me, and is probably definitely responsible for me being here today, probably.
Oh, I hope he's listening. You'll have to send him the podcast so that he can listen to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So how did you learn? Tell me about taking lessons, and how did you learn music?
So the original learning of music was very similar to most typical students, in the fact that, I like I said, was introduced to band at the middle school level, and then got into jazz band. But one of these students that I had been meeting and working with, who I was friends with, who went to Blake, they said, oh, you should study with the saxophonist Valerie Gillespie. She was the saxophonist who taught classically at University of South Florida. And so I sought her out and took private lessons with her. And it was a little bit unique at this point, in the fact that I had been reading literary Braille, meaning print, but I had not yet been introduced to Braille music. Up until this point, Braille music was very, very hard to get. There were only a handful.
Can I ask you, I'm sorry just to interrupt, but I got to ask, how do you do Braille music? How can you use your hands to play a saxophone and read Braille? Don't you do Braille with your fingers?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, so I don't is the answer. The saxophone teacher. Yeah, so what I did, and what the saxophone instructor would do is I actually had to memorize all of my music. So listening was a huge part of my early music education. What I would do is I would get the saxophone parts to my band music. I would spend most of the time learning the music with the saxophone teacher. Sometimes I'd have her record the parts on tape back then. Not to date myself, but and sometimes would have to sit next to a student and have a student play the music for me, and then only afterwards would I get the Braille music that actually was kind of a combination of myself, my mother, and one of my teachers of the visually impaired. At the middle school level, my vision instructor, her name was Kathy Krimpleski. She was a music student at Florida State, and when I got into band, she helped me kind of find out, and later on it would be Sue Glazer, another vision instructor. Sue, if you're listening, I just want to say hey. They kind of helped me to learn about Braille music, and it's funny. Braille it's 6 dots, so it's you feel it with your fingers. So you are correct, but it was a lot of memorization. So it was kind of learn the music first, memorize the music, listen to the music as much as you can, which I tell students today, and then I would get the Braille usually 2 and 3 weeks after I had learned the music, and I'd use the Braille to kind of check. Am I playing these right notes? Am I playing the right volume, the dynamic, accidentals, meaning like how much emphasis to give a note, things like that is how I would do it.
Fred, what do you think about that, learning music and that kind of dimension? How does that seem to you?
I got to be honest with you. I learned music in the same way because I had a hard time reading music, so I spent a lot of time memorizing.
So it's just memorizing.
Yeah, because I started out singing at such an early age, and even sang publicly a lot, just because I had a voice that people thought was a good voice. So I had learned a lot and had done a lot of performing and stuff. And then when I went into formal classes to learn to read music, it was challenging for me, only because my brain just worked immediately.
When was that? At what age were you learning?
In elementary school.
In elementary school.
In elementary school. But
so you started out very young then?
I started out pretty young. Well, fifth grade is when I was really kind of introduced to reading music, and it was really challenging for me because there's a whole other story to that as well. But very similar. I can't imagine. I mean, Matt, I know what it is to memorize music. Like, I've had to memorize scores to perform with orchestras. And I literally memorized it because I didn't have that aptitude for reading really, really well. But yeah, so similar memorization experiences, but then to be able to then translate that and kind of check yourself, it's powerful.
Well, it probably also helps with improvisation. Like jazz, so much of jazz is improvisation. I was trained to play classical piano, and so I learned to read music and play what I saw and then memorize it. And it's hard for me to improvise and with people, so I think maybe there's some freedom in not just studying the music.
But I want to say both of you were inspired by first listening to music, right? And so Matt, you mentioned your family had a big influence on you. They were playing music. Were they playing jazz?
Not necessarily. A little bit. A lot of different styles of music. It didn't really start with jazz. My father was actually a big Bruce Springsteen fan, so that was very different.
Heard a lot of Bruce growing up. How about you, Fred? Same thing? Listened to a lot of music growing up?
I grew up listening to Count Basie, Duke Ellington, all the jazz greats, Ella Fitzgerald. So yeah, my dad had, just hundreds of records, and so I really grew up in that realm there.
Matt, when you were at FSU, you worked with Marcus Roberts. Tell us about that. That was somebody who had a big influence on your life.
Yes, and actually it started before then. It kind of ties everything together. Early on when I was freshman or sophomore, I can't remember, about 15 years old, Marcus, he's a Grammy Award nominated jazz pianist and played most famously with Wynton Marsalis, who performs with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra in New York and has several recordings out. But Marcus came to do a Renaissance festival at the Straz Center. Back then it was called the Tampa Bay Performing Arts Center. And through a friend of mine and some work that me and my mother did, we were able to reach out to Marcus through some colleagues and to the Straz Center, and they arranged for me to go backstage and meet Marcus after his performance. And I got to speak to him, and he told me about his experiences with Braille music and going to the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind, and his experiences up at Florida State, and said, if you keep studying music, man, you should come up and study with me. So that's what I did. And it was a very, very inspiring and really rewarding experience. He would casually at first just have students come out to his house, and he would just play and have us just kind of all improvise and jam together. And then later on, he's now an adjunct professor at Florida State University and teaches a jazz combo, and has even brought Wynton Marsalis down a few times to play with the students, and regularly performs with his trio with Jason Marsalis, Wynton's brother, and has his own trio, and they perform and do a lot of residencies at Florida State, and just really, really inspiring, and has really made a huge impact on me, not only as a musician but as a person, and somebody who I've literally looked to for guidance in learning Braille music and learning how to be a musician with a disability.
And Wynton is a great educator himself, the way he breaks down jazz, explains it to people, even young people, right?
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he is amazing.
Yeah.
So are there any challenges involved with being a blind person teaching sighted students? Is what you're doing at the Patel?
Yes, definitely. I would say, one of the biggest things is the actual music itself. Again, the challenge of trying to get the same exact, what they're seeing in print, I'm seeing in Braille, which sometimes is almost not possible. But me being able to, read the Braille and, okay, this is the visualization of what they're seeing on print, because the music sometimes can literally get in your way. I've found some students, because of their difficulties with learning music, the print music, trying to read it gets in their way of performing and improvising. So I do things like I have an exercise where I turn the lights off and I make everybody play in the dark. And it's very funny because it really teaches the students a lot. And it's not something, yes, I definitely do it as somebody who's visually impaired and blind, but I think it's something that any musician should do, because it teaches the students to kind of really use your other senses, to listen, to kind of feel the music. And jazz improvisation is all about that interaction. We're trying to have a conversation musically. And so it forces them to use their other senses and to have a little bit better of a conversation and not rely upon just the sheet music that's in front of them. And it's funny because when we're done, they say, oh man, it was so tough. And I was like, well, welcome to every day of my life.
But as a blind person, I have read that, your other senses become more heightened. Would you say that you are more attuned to listening things and hearing things that sighted people might miss?
I think I am, but I think any sighted person could be just as attuned as I am. It's using muscles, just as Fred was talking earlier about how he listened to music. I have to use my hearing, because if I don't listen, for instance, crossing a street, if I don't listen to the perpendicular and parallel traffic, I could literally die. I could literally get hit by a car, So you're taught from a young age as somebody who's blind that you have to rely upon your hearing, upon your sense of where you are. Because, for instance, the room, the air in the room, even, are you inside? Are you outside? Trying to observe how far away are people from you? What are your surroundings? So you have to use the other senses. So it's just like muscles, it's just like working out. It's not like I was born with like superhuman hearing, I'm not like Daredevil or anything like that, It's just muscles. And I think anybody can do it. And it's something I actually try to teach my students to do, to use their ears and listen, because it's a huge crossover in music, I think.
In 2014, you joined Artists for All, Matt, and you now lead their Young Performers program. Tell us about that. What is that?
Yeah, so Arts for All, it was originally called VSA, which stood for Very Special Arts, and it was founded by a woman who was actually one of our former U.S. ambassadors to Ireland. Her name was Jean Kennedy Smith, and it was founded through the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and they're still having it today. They have a national soloist competition and several different things, and the idea was to basically provide the opportunity for all ages of people living with disabilities, to really learn about, participate through, and enjoy the arts. And they have, several different programs. And so we were VSA Florida. We were like the second or third, I think, offshoot of the DC, of the Kennedy Center. And then about 7 or 10 years ago, for reasons I won't go into right now, we rebranded, and we're called Arts for All Florida. And what I do is I coordinate their Young Performers program, and it's for students who are disabled, who are performers ages 14 to 25. And it started out, there's an international soloist competition that VSA has, and we were kind of an offshoot of it. And they used to have performances and celebrations of the performances at various venues. And then during the pandemic, of course, that was not able to happen. So what I did was I established a virtual ensemble that we called the Young Performers Youth Ensemble. And I took these performers, they audition every spring. We select 3 from each category, music, theater, and dance. And I compose and arrange a popular music selection and send parts to each of these students. They have a different disability, and they're located in a different city, again, ages 14 to 25, through this audition process that are selected. And they record an individual video, they send it back to me, and then with the assistance of some of my colleagues, we sync it all up and put it on the Arts for All Florida social media pages to be aired. And we've done about 9 or 10 of them. Like I said, we've been doing it since about 2020. But Arts for All has several different programs, for performers with disabilities, both for visual and performing arts.
Yeah, so we'll hear later from Emily Dixon. She'll be on in a few minutes to talk about Arts for All. Can you tell us why, Matt, an arts education you think is important in general, but also for people with disabilities in particular? And I want to hear from you, Fred, on that as well. But what do you think, Matt? Why is an arts education so important?
Because I think it can really give an opportunity and an access to so many of those people who may not thrive in another environment. What I mean by that is I'm saying that there have been, there's research even that students who maybe, they have trouble academically or don't do well in school, and then you put an instrument in their hands and they suddenly come alive. They suddenly are have that freedom. I remember hearing a story about a young boy who had some cognitive disabilities and had a very, very difficult time paying attention in class and was just all over the place, misbehaving. Teachers didn't know what to do with him, and they put a pair of drumsticks in his hands, and the band teacher got him some drum lessons, and he went from being a failing student to a straight A student and on the honor roll and everything. So I think it just really helps a lot of students who might not be as fortunate as others and don't have other opportunities to really thrive in an academic area, and kind of hand in hand with it's twofold for those with disabilities. Just as we discussed a little bit earlier, yes, I did have to put forth a little bit more effort than the average student when I was growing up, and I think having these opportunities for the arts, it gives people with disabilities again another avenue of exploring life, of exploring occupation. It's given me a sense of purpose and employment, friendship, all of the above.
What about you, Fred?
Well, I think it's really important for us to recognize that, for instance, as an arts institution, how important art is across the board. But I also think that there still exists some sense in the minds of folk who do not have a disability, to be able to have a greater interaction and an understanding of the talents, arts, and expertise that folks who may have a disability have.
Right.
I mean, I remember in one of the productions that we did a number of years ago that I directed, there was a young lady who walked with crutches, and when she first came to be involved, she left the crutches outside of the room and kind of slid herself in because she was concerned that she wouldn't be accepted. And within a matter of 3 or 4 days, everyone was playing with her. They were playing with the crutches. I mean, I think to the degree that we can understand. I mean, for instance, Matt's expertise as a musician is Matt's expertise as a musician. And whatever he needed to do and be in order to make that happen is a really powerful thing, and his artistry speaks for itself. And so I think when we talk about the creating opportunities for us to know more about each other and be included and also learn what we don't know. I mean, having the opportunity to be a part of the accessibility committee awakens my mind, my understanding of what is needed or what can be put in place to support folk. And at the ADA celebration that we just did, we had the opportunity to hear young, beautifully talented folk, creating music who may face another challenge, if you will, or in their life, but music transcends that. And it also creates an opportunity for us to really feel the full measure of our humanity. And I think that's so important because for years, someone who had a disability or whatever was considered to be, unfortunately, somebody who might be less than, when in fact that's not the case. The opportunity to really be included and to more broadly understand how we can contribute to each other, support each other, and celebrate each other is the ultimate goal.
And so that was, you mentioned the ADA celebration at the Straz. That was an event in July to celebrate the 34th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's an event that happens occasionally at the Straz, semi-regularly to celebrate. And what were some of the, Matt, you performed, who were some of the other performers that were there? What disabilities did they have, and did they...
I think, there were, I think, a couple of people who may have had some, been on the spectrum or some autism challenges.
So there's a variety of disabilities that people have and that are addressed in different ways.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, like our goal was to put together a dynamic program that had some great art, and I didn't even really pay attention You know what I mean? Beyond what people needed in terms of, which that's the beauty of the thing. It was like, we just presented and set up and did what we needed to do and made sure everybody had. But I don't remember stepping back and going, oh, well, he's blind, or,
Right.
And that's a part of the thing. And that's a part of the power of the ADA is to, for want of another word, normalize environments so that everybody can be, and do who they are and what they need to be. So I apologize for not being able to identify that specifically, but it wasn't on my palate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, but the Americans with Disabilities Act is a great example of a bipartisan legislation that kind of changed America, didn't it? I mean, Matt, absolutely. Do you think you would have had the same experience in life without that law?
No, and I can actually tell you, I can speak to an experience when I was very young. My family wanted me to go to a private institution of education, and at the time, the ADA had just passed, and they told my family, we would be happy to have your son here, but we got to be honest with you, we really can't provide him with what he needs, and we would rather he not attend our institution. And it was something that has really stuck with me and has changed. Of course, now there's equal access, and something that's really stuck with me. And so, no, there's no way. The ADA has really, gone ahead and kind of torn down some of those barriers that people with disabilities possibly have.
Which we try to do at the Strass Center as well. Anyone who comes to the center, we have sign language, American Sign Language folk who can help with that. Matt has helped us tremendously in terms of being able to really understand other resources that we can do for people who are not sighted, for people that are in wheelchairs or whatever, to whatever level we can. We have
autistic. You have programs for autistic people so that they can come and enjoy the theater and an environment that might be more appropriate for them or and comfortable for them.
Yeah, most recently we've really set up a room where if an autistic person or if a family is coming, can be in that room. So that room is designed to, be compatible and be a comfort zone for them to be able to experience a show, while at the same time, there are certain needs and desires that, can really be met. And we're ongoing in terms of our learning, and just last week presented at a national conference that was really sponsored by the Kennedy Center, all about accessibility. And so we were able to really, really share some of the advances that we've been able to bring forth at the Strass.
But to your point, this has obviously helped people with disabilities. I'm old enough to remember the days when people with disabilities were sort of shunted off into other classrooms and you didn't see them. Yeah. And so what has the impact had on other people who don't have disabilities?
Well, I want to believe, and certainly in listening to the conversations that we've had with, for instance, volunteers who work for us, I think it has presented an opportunity for more understanding, and I'm going to use the word more acceptability, really accepting and taking responsibility and wanting to be supportive, and more broadly understanding that to the degree that we can support each other and dispel that old myth or concept that, if someone has a disability, they're kind of hands off and, that kind of thing, where we're more together and more understanding and committed to continuing to learn as well.
We've got Emily Dixon on the phone from Arts for All Florida. Emily, you are on the line. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for being with us. So, Emily, you're the program director at Arts for All, which is a nonprofit that promotes arts access for people who are disabled. You just celebrated your 40th anniversary a couple of years ago. Tell us why do we need an organization like Arts for All? Why is it important?
Of course. Thank you for having me. We believe that arts is for everybody, and regardless of your social status or your disability, we believe that art should be a part of everyone's lives. I think arts make the world go round. So our organization is really passionate about that. Our mission is to provide support and champion arts education and cultural experiences for and by people with disabilities. And our vision is to create a world in which the arts are universally accessible. And I think that really rings true in the programming that we provide.
Right. So tell us about some of that programming.
Yeah, so as Matt already mentioned, he helps run one of our big programs, which is the Young Performers Program, which is for artists all around the state of Florida. Additional programming we have is we provide over 50 school residencies. So we have artists going into schools around the state of Florida into more underprivileged areas, providing arts education in the classroom, which is a really great benefit because not only are our artists getting to work with the students, they're also getting to work alongside teachers. And we have a really large program in the summer that's called Animation Gets Real. It's a summer camp for students on the autism spectrum where they work with digital animators and sound design to create their own animations. And we also have a lot of programs that are called community art classes where we work in different communities. We have them on via Zoom and throughout the state of Florida, providing weekly and biweekly opportunities for people with disabilities to be a part of art classes and movement classes and dance classes. And we also have an adult registry, an artist registry for those artists who are in their adult years. We have a registry where we sell a calendar, and we also provide opportunities for them to showcase their work throughout the state.
Oh, and yeah, you sell their art on your website, correct?
We do, yes,
yeah.
We do, which is a really, I think that's a big part of a lot of times in arts education. There's a lot of focus on the younger students, which are so important, but everyone grows up, and a lot of those people remain artists, which we hope for, and this is an opportunity for them to showcase their work and to sell their work and for us to help get the word out about these artists as well.
One of the programs that you have that I think is really interesting is the expanding opportunities in theaters and the performing arts. So you're connecting people with disabilities with theater and entertainment venues. How does that work? Tell us about that program. Who are some of the partners?
Yeah, we partner with a lot of people throughout the state, including the Straz, to bring artists and to bring individuals into maybe settings where they might feel at first they aren't welcome. I think we're all about breaking those barriers and, finding the places where everyone can coexist. So, theater is especially one of those that can oftentimes be seen as a challenge because of different obstacles. So this is just something that we like to work with this different theaters throughout the state so we can provide that for more students and more adults.
How would people get in touch with Arts for Florida if they want to get involved? You have our volunteers. You have volunteers working with you?
Yeah, we do. So the best way to get it to follow us is really on social media, which is Arts for All, and it's actually the number 4, Arts for All Florida. Our website is also arts4allflorida.org, and from there we have a lot of information about what we offer, about our programs. We also have a really cool program that we call Student of the Month, where teachers, or if they're homeschooled, whoever is there, whether it's their parent or another facilitator, can nominate students from kindergarten through high school for Student of the Month. We take in those applications, and each month we award a student. They get a trophy, they get a gift certificate, the teacher gets a gift certificate. It's a really exciting way for us to celebrate those students that are in the classrooms working. But all that information can be found on our website. We also post frequently on our social media about those opportunities.
Have you guys seen an increase in demand for your services with the cut in funding for arts programming in the state?
Absolutely. I think that was something that everybody is feeling across the state of Florida. It was a really big shock. It was not at all ever anticipated that we would lose that amount of funding.
How much did you lose?
So the entire bill was cut. Our portion, I think it was around, we lost about $50,000 of our budget.
50,000.
60,000.
60,000, which just, in terms of an entire state budget of multi-billion dollars, it doesn't sound like much, but for a nonprofit group like yours.
I think that's exactly it. We're so lucky that we have a fabulous executive director, Jen Sabos, and we have a fabulous board. And the first call she made was to me and said, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it work. We have, we're really lucky that we have a really great board. We have an endowment. We're housed under the College of Education at USF, so we have support from them. But, there's a lot of nonprofits that are not as lucky. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for almost 20 years, and, the weight that was felt from a lot of my colleagues, we're not in the same boat. So it doesn't sound like a ton, but to these organizations, it is a ton. It's a huge, huge impact. We've had to make a lot of pivots, a lot of changes. For instance, a lot of our programs, we would love to run, 52 weeks a year, at least, let's say 48, because we take some for holidays, and we've had to cut all of those back just to accommodate, factoring those in. So it's a really, really big financial hit, and something that was just not anticipated. Of course, every budget season, I think every nonprofit goes, okay, we're anticipating, maybe not a full funding, but just to get absolutely no funding was just, was really that, like I said, it was like a wave that went through the nonprofit world. It was like a bad game of telephone. It's like, did you hear? Did you hear? Did you hear?
And are you hearing anything about the future? Is this the new reality that all of these nonprofits, these arts groups, these cultural groups are going to have to deal with? Or is there any hope that you can turn this around?
I think it has a lot to do with our legislation and our government and what's going to happen there. So, we don't know. All we can do is present, to apply for this, to apply for the arts and culture each year, it's a grant process, basically, and you basically have to just, in a way, I like to think about it as, defending but highlighting what you did. So we have a ton of data about how many people we're affecting and impacting and all of that. So I think it's going to, hopefully next year they realize, I always like that quote, that Earth without art is just it's just EH. I think so much of what we do revolves around art, because not only the nonprofits, we're not only including organizations like us, it was also organizations like aquariums and museums and zoos and, a lot of those impacts, which I'm hoping, unfortunately, that maybe with the lack of funding that will be felt and it will come back. But, hard to say. It's not in my realm of, I'm not in the government, but.
Well, I'm sure you'll be out there advocating. One more time, tell us how people can get in touch with Arts for All Florida.
Yes, the best way to get a hold of us is online via arts4allflorida.org, and that is also on Instagram and Facebook is where we post all of our upcoming events, our classes, and all that information.
Emily, thanks for being with us.
Yes, and we just want to say thank you to Matt, who is such an important part of our program and our organization, and we're always so thankful to have him as part of the team. So thank you for this today.
You're listening to Wavemakers on WMNF with Janet and Tom, and our guests today are Fred Johnson, who's a local legend in the jazz world and also serves on the Straz Center's Accessibility Committee, and Matt Weimuller. He's a jazz saxophonist and an instructor at the Patel Conservatory and also an advocate for musicians and artists with disabilities. We'll be back right after this to talk a little bit more with Fred and Matt, but first here's a little break with some info about a great show on WMNF.
Jazz is alive at WMNF. Tune in Sunday evenings at 8 for Colors of Jazz at our new time, featuring new releases from new artists, old favorites, international jazz from Europe, Asia, and Canada, covering everything from big band swing to bop to fusion. We play it all, plus specials celebrating the music of giants like Ellington, Miles Davis, Pat Metheny, Quincy Jones, Chick Corea, even Frank Zappa. We play the music you'll hear no place else on the radio. Check out our interviews with local jazz musicians. Jazz is what America sounds like, and it's yours to listen to come Sunday evening. If you can't catch us live, play it back from the archives.
Jazz is alive here at WMNF, and it's also alive right here in this studio with two great jazz musicians.
Two great jazz.
Jazz isn't dead, it's just evolving, right, Fred?
Absolutely. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So, Matt, you said that you have said that your greatest personal goal is to champion the cause of increasing Braille literacy for young blind musicians. Tell us about that. Why is that important to you?
Well, I think it really creates literacy for young blind musicians. Just as myself, there's kind of an argument or a debate, not only amongst visually impaired, artists and musicians, but in this what I would call the sighted world as well, about learning music through ear or learning the written notation. And I would argue, of course, that you do both. I've had a lot of band directors and instructors come to me and say, "Oh, I have a student, who's totally blind. Our plan is to just basically have them learn everything by ear. We're all set. They have perfect pitch, and perfect pitch is mainly you can hear any type of sound and identify it musically. Saying, you hear a car horn, and you're like, oh, that's a C, A, and a G. And a lot of
can you do that?
A little bit. Yeah. So a lot of instructors think, okay, well, we don't really need to worry about that. And I say, no. I say, well, if that's the case, why don't you just do that for everybody else? Why doesn't everybody just learn by listening? And actually, they might be better off if they did, but they don't. And so my argument is that they need to do the same thing. And just like I learned how to read Braille at the same time as most of my peers learned print, the same should be said for music. And so I've made it kind of my personal goal to try to find ways to make Braille music more accessible. When I was young, there was literally a handful of what they called Braille music transcribers. And the way it worked is you'd have to send the piece out in print that you wanted to be brailled, and you had to request it. And it took about, I would say, 6 to 8 months to get a piece back. Wow. So if you think about that in terms of your band room, 6 to 8 months, your program's done.
Mm-hmm. School year's over.
School year's over. So that does not work. And so, like I said, I was very lucky. My mother and my teacher, the visually impaired, took it upon themselves to try to say, well, we got to find a better way to do this. And so they helped me, along with some others, learn how to produce the Braille music code ourselves, actually. And we've even connected. There's an organization, it's called Dancing Dots out in Philadelphia, a gentleman who's blind who plays trumpet named Bill McCann. And he has a whole set of computerized programs, actually, that now you can scan music and print it out in Braille. And they have a number of different music notation software for the blind.
So what do you use, like a 3D printer?
It's not a 3D printer. It's a Braille printer, actually. So it prints everything in Braille. It has, Braille is a 6-dot system. So if you think about a rectangle with 3 dots stacked vertically on the left, 1, 2, 3, and 3 on the right, 4, 5, 6. It's the combination of those dots that make up everything. So basically, the printer, it just like a Braille typewriter, a Perkins Brailler, they call it. It makes the dots perforated in the paper.
Okay.
It's just like anything else. So it's not a 3D printer. It's an actual printer designed for printing out Braille that I use. And
how do you contact students? I mean, I'm just curious about how you're making contact with blind musicians.
Yeah, it's really just like any, again, the thing I tell everybody is that when you're trying to work with people, and Fred did this brilliantly earlier, is that you really just want to go about it the same way as anybody else. So I asked the question in turn, well, how do you connect with any musician or instructor, or student? And it's really a lot of by who a word of mouth, meeting blind musicians. Thank goodness today, we have this world now that we can communicate with somebody in Australia or China, the opposite side of the world. And so for instance, there's a really great musician in Sydney, Australia, who I got to work with, who's blind and plays at the Sydney Opera House. And I call him sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's daytime for him, and we talk and we say, oh, what are you working on? And the same thing here in the States. And so it's really a lot of knowing people. I attend conferences over the years, like the National Federation of the Blind, I attended just before I went to Florida State. They had a Braille music camp, the Dancing Dots program. And I worked with a gentleman who's blind named Henry Butler, who's a very famous jazz pianist as well, and blues.
From New Orleans.
From New Orleans, yes. And we stayed, me and 9 other blind musicians stayed at a they called it TRAC. There's like a rehabilitation center of sorts for disabled students. And we spent the day learning music and learning Braille music and learning how to produce Braille music and read it. And so, people like that have really been, the champions, Marcus Roberts, Bill McCann, Henry Butler, networking, just like you do for anything else, has been the way that I've been able to kind of to work arts for all, I've gotten students from the, working with, they have schools for the deaf and blind that I've worked with.
Okay. Well, let's play a little bit of your music, actually. You sent us a track that we're going to play right now. Can you got that for us, John? Oh, no, went away? Okay. I'll try to forward it to you. But you, the song that is Dots on a Page, it's called?
Yeah, and so this is all about, so the thing about Braille, in music, for anybody who probably doesn't know, is music is, they have the written music, we have these things called staff lines. If you think about a white piece of paper with black lines that go across it, and where the notes are on those spaces and lines, that determines what pitches, what notes you're going to play. In Braille, there are no staff lines. It is all a combination of the 6-dot system of Braille, and there's different things that different symbols, an octave marking, a staccato marking, meaning how hard or how soft to play. And I think here we go. I think we got it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, it's basically, dots on a page. It has multiple meanings. I actually had a pet dog named Dot, Polka Dot, we called her. I called her Dot for short. And so it's supposed to be, Braille dots on a page, and a lot of people will say, just read the dots, just read the ink.
Right.
And who are the other musicians on that track?
These are 3 musicians that I went to Florida State with. I believe we have Mr. Austin Johnson on piano, Mr. Will Goebel on bass, and Mr. Dave Potter on drums. They were a group of musicians who Jason Marsalis formed a vibes quartet with that perform regularly in New Orleans.
Very good.
And so we could spend the last few minutes talking a little bit just about music. Matt, any great inspirations musically and favorite musicians or people who inspired you?
Yeah,
talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely, John Coltrane has been a huge inspiration. For jazz, he's kind of one of the jazz greats. I always try to expose the students that I work with to listen to as many musicians as they can. So John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon, Sonny Rollins. These are saxophone players. There's also Rasan Roland Kirk. He's a very famous blind saxophonist. He played 3 horns at once. You should check him out. And then today, getting to work with, like Wynton Marsalis was a huge inspiration to me. So getting to work with, his pianist, Marcus Roberts, Branford Marsalis, Chris Potter, another saxophonist who lives in New York. He played with Steely Dan, and Branford played with Sting. He was Sting's saxophonist. So just all the great saxophonists, old and new, I would say.
How about you, Fred?
I think my first inspiration was hearing Nat King Cole sing when I was 7 years old, and just felt the magic of that and wanted to understand that more. Had the opportunity when I was 22 years old to meet Joe Williams, who was my father's favorite singer, and Joe had a lot of influence on me.
What a voice he had.
Yeah, I went on stage with him a lot, and he said, "Look, man, you got to keep singing. You got a voice that needs to be heard." So, Joe Williams. I listened to a lot of Miles. I listened to a lot of Freddie Hubbard. I think my favorite singer stylist was Carmen McRae. For me, both as a piano player and as a singer, she was just really, really phenomenal. And I listened to a lot of Miles Davis. And
how could you not?
Yeah,
one of the most influential musicians ever in jazz, don't you think?
And I played with and opened for a lot of people, but I think the greatest experience that I've had on stage ever was with Chick Corea. Chick was not only an amazing musician, but he was an amazing human being, and I had an opportunity to tour with him several times and go to Japan with him and Christian McBride and John Scofield and Roy Haynes and
holy cow.
Yeah, so the time that I spent working with Chick was really
and of course, Chick Corea being local, did you ever get a chance to hang out with him?
Oh yeah, we hung out. Yeah. I had this great story one time where Chick wrote this tune. We were going to Japan to perform both a symphonic piece as well as a tribute to Bud Powell, and he gave me this recording of this song that he recorded, and he said, "Look, man, here I'm gonna give this to you, and then come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll just rehearse it, get ready to go to Japan." So I went and I got it, and I spent a lot of time on it and did my thing, and we came back and I was at his house and we sat down at the piano, and he said, "Okay, let's do this." So he started playing, and I was whipping through it. I mean, I was throwing down, and at the end of the thing, he was like, "Wow, man, that was really great, but that's not what I wrote." So we had to go back through, like kind of note for note, because it was a period of time where he was doing note for note stuff. And it was really, really hard. I was like, "Chick, man, I don't know how to do this." He said, "No, Fred, you just been singing so long and people love you. They just let you do your thing because you do a great version of music." And he really spent so much time. We took a break. We went and ate some pasta, and then we went back together. So he was that kind of a cat, he was just always made time for people.
He was so prolific.
Yeah.
I don't understand how he could produce that much music.
Chick just lived music. Like it was kind of a time of day thing for him too. Like he would spend hours and hours just writing. One day I was at his house and he was like, "Look, man, I wrote this suite," and he had like oboe parts and bassoon parts and whatever. And my mind was just blown. But music was everything for him. Yeah. He lived, music just poured through him.
Yeah.
It was amazing, really amazing.
Well, we came back with this segment as Tom introduced it with Jazz is Alive. I think WMNF has 3 jazz shows now.
Yes, we do.
What do you think, Fred? What do you think about the jazz scene in the Tampa Bay area? Do we have much of one? Is it growing? Is it shrinking?
Well, that's a hard question. I think that there are a lot of folk who love jazz. I've been here a long time, and I remember when, jazz groups, we had 11 gigs a week. So, I think it's just, it's cyclical. Mm-hmm. One of the things, and thank you all for keeping music alive on the radio. I think that's one of the challenges, is that the broader population doesn't have the same level of access for the full measure of music. So it's growing. Certainly, institutions in town are really supporting that,
And young people are still interested. Matt, you are young compared to the rest of us in the room. You are young. We've got a very young person who hosts one of the jazz shows, David Diaz on WMNF. He's a young guy.
There's a lot of great young players, and I think that conversation needs to continue.
Right.
Music education has increased a lot of players.
Right, but you got to create spaces where people can play. Because that's what
we're missing, right? With venues,
and with regularity, because you got to play. Right? You can only learn. You can only do so much with your head. You got to take chances.
Back in the day, you probably had several different places in Tampa.
We had a lot of different places to play. But then we had radio. You know what I mean? We had promotion on radio, and that's a big important thing for people to understand, to get the breadth of that. So, I'm encouraged. I'm not a young guy. I'm an old cat, but still in the game, and I really believe, that it's important. Even now, like the Al Downing Jazz Association, they're still doing programs and presenting at different venues. The Straz Center is making a broader commitment this year to do more. Tampa Jazz Club, Sarasota. So we just got to keep it alive, keep it going, and keep playing the music.
What do you think, Matt? How did a young person get into jazz?
Yeah, and I kind of echo what Fred just says, it's tough. It's tough. I have a lot of students who come to me and say, how can we play? And I say, well, try to find a jam session. And it's a little bit more, even since I've been playing, we don't have as many places for young people to play as many jam sessions. They have some good ones, out there. The Al Downing Jazz Society definitely has a good one over at the Hangar that I encourage a lot of my students to go to. And
the Hangar, that's where in St. Pete?
Downtown St. Pete.
Downtown St. Pete. And they've had some places, Ella's Folk Art here in Tampa. They've been having a jam session that some of the students over at USF have been trying to keep alive. But it's it's just tough. I really I'm very proud and happy to say that you all have really helped. Bob Seymour was a huge inspiration to me growing up. I'd listen to his all night jazz, and so happy he's over here now doing his thing. And is create, I think, things for young people, and so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make the students like this is an art form that's it really takes time to listen to. And that's one of the biggest things I would say is unfortunately we live in a little bit of a society today where we want things right here, right now. When the experience when I talk to my students.
Speaking of right here, right now, we are running out of time.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We're going to have to wrap this up.
Wrap this up. Thanks for being here.
It's been a great conversation.
Been a great conversation. Up next is NPR News, followed by Wide Awake America with Nadine Smith. This is WMNF Tampa.